The jungle erupted with the sound of gunfire as Sergeant First Class Avery Collins took cover behind a fallen mahogany tree, her blue combat medic armband standing out sharply against the green-gray tones of the Philippine rainforest. 50 meters ahead, her unit was trapped under heavy fire from enemy forces dug into fortified positions on a hillside. She was evaluating her options when 3 soldiers were already wounded, 2 of them critically. Then came the call that would change everything: their commander was down. Major Thomas Garrett, the officer leading their counterterrorism mission, had been hit by enemy fire. Avery watched him collapse and saw his HK-417 rifle slip from his grasp and slide across the muddy terrain. The tactical reality was harsh and unforgiving. Without Garrett, their command structure would fall apart, and if that happened, 22 American operators along with their Filipino partners would be torn apart by an enemy that knew this landscape far better than they did. Grabbing her medical equipment, Avery sprinted forward as bullets tore through the surrounding vegetation, with rounds shredding tree trunks and sending wooden fragments flying like deadly projectiles. She covered 40 meters in what felt like an eternity, diving down beside where Garrett had fallen. When she asked where he was hit, the major was conscious but struggling badly, blood soaking through his tactical vest. He told her he'd been hit in the chest on the left side and couldn't breathe properly. Avery's hands moved with practiced efficiency as she cut away his vest to examine the wound. The bullet had entered high on his left chest, likely missing his heart but potentially collapsing a lung, as evidenced by blood bubbling from the entry wound with each difficult breath. She recognized it immediately as a tension pneumothorax, meaning he would suffocate unless she relieved the pressure in his chest cavity. After warning him about the pain, she prepared the needle and inserted the catheter into his chest wall at the second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line. There was an audible release of air as pressure escaped from the pleural space, and Garrett's breathing immediately became easier. When Garrett's focus returned to her, he wasn't thinking about his injury but about the operation falling apart around them. He told her that Lieutenant Parker was capable but didn't have the complete tactical picture. Avery insisted her job was keeping him alive, but Garrett countered that her job was whatever would keep the entire unit alive. With surprising strength, he grabbed her arm and directed her to relay tactical commands through his radio. Over the crackling radio clipped to his vest, Garrett ordered Parker to follow Collins' directions as she could see the battlefield from their position. When Avery protested that a medic couldn't do this, Garrett insisted she could and would. He instructed her to tell Parker that hostile forces were trying to flank through the creek bed on their right and that he needed to move the 3rd Fire Team to counter it. Looking at the terrain and tracking the probable enemy movement through the jungle, Avery realized Garrett was correct. The creek bed provided concealed access to the American right flank, and if the enemy penetrated there, their entire defensive position would crumble. She keyed the radio and relayed the information to Lieutenant Parker, who initially resisted taking orders from a medic. She clarified that he was taking orders from Major Garrett and she was simply relaying them, adding that she needed to return to treating casualties and asking him to acknowledge the order. After a pause, Parker confirmed the 3rd Fire Team was moving and asked about other wounded. She reported 3 critical and 2 stable casualties, saying she would get to them once Garrett was stabilized. Turning back to the Major, she knew the needle decompression had bought him time, but he was still losing blood and she needed to pack the wound, establish intravenous access, and get fluids running according to standard trauma protocol. However, Garrett's hand shot out, pointing to where his HK-417 rifle lay in the open 15 meters away. The weapon was a 7.62mm rifle, accurate and powerful, which the Major preferred over the standard 5.56mm M4 for its greater stopping power. When Avery said she needed to focus on his treatment, Garrett insisted she needed to focus on keeping them alive, explaining that redeploying the 3rd Fire Team would create a gap in their center that the enemy would exploit. Someone needed to provide suppressive fire on that advance until Parker could reposition forces. Despite Avery's protest that she wasn't qualified, Garrett reminded her that she had qualified as expert with the M4 in basic training, and the HK-417 was essentially just a larger rifle with the same manual of operation. He looked directly at her and ordered her to provide suppressive fire on hostile positions while continuing to coordinate defensive operations. Avery looked at the wounded soldiers needing treatment, at the rifle lying exposed, and at the enemy positions marked by muzzle flashes on the hill. She was a combat medic, and the Geneva Conventions designated medics as protected personnel. The blue armband signified she was focused on preserving lives, not ending them. But in this moment, Preserving lives meant preventing their defensive line from collapsing. She positioned Garrett's hand over the packed entry wound and told him to keep pressure on it while she retrieved the rifle, adding that he shouldn't die while she was gone. He replied that he wasn't planning on it. Avery sprinted to the HK-417 as rounds cracked past her, grabbed the weapon, verified the chamber was loaded and ready, then sprinted back to Garrett's position. The rifle felt heavier than the M4 she trained with, but the controls were familiar, including the safety, magazine, selector switch, and optic sight. Raising the weapon, she found a target through the scope, a hostile fighter in a fortified position 70 meters uphill. She had never fired a 7.62mm rifle in combat and had barely fired one in training, but the fundamentals remained the same: breath control, trigger squeeze, and follow-through. When she fired, the recoil was much heavier than the M4, surprising her, but the hostile fighter she aimed at either dropped or took cover. Garrett told her that Parker's repositioning was taking too long and instructed her to tell him to use smoke to cover the movement. While acquiring another target, she keyed the radio and relayed the instruction to deploy smoke to cover the third fire team's movement. Parker confirmed he was already implementing this and asked where the suppressive fire Garrett mentioned was. She replied that she was working on it and fired again, dropping another target. The HK-417's optic was perfectly zeroed, as Garrett's personal weapon was maintained to exacting standards. She reported that hostile positions were marked by her fire and requested that support weapons concentrate on those locations. Parker acknowledged seeing her impacts and adjusted fire accordingly. The sound of American machine guns intensified as support weapons shifted to the positions Avery was marking with her rifle fire, and the enemy advance stalled. Garrett, his voice growing weaker, told her to check the left flank where he had seen movement in the rocks. Shifting her aim and scanning through the optic, Avery spotted 4 fighters moving through a boulder field on the left, attempting to position themselves to enfilade the American line. She engaged them methodically with 4 shots, downing 3 and forcing the 4th to retreat. She reported the neutralized left flank threat to Parker but warned that he needed to extend defensive positions on the left side as the enemy would attempt that approach again. Second fire team was moving, and Parker asked about the major's condition. Glancing at Garrett, Avery saw his poor color and labored breathing despite the chest decompression, recognizing he needed evacuation soon. She told Parker he needed evacuation and asked about the quick reaction force status. The QRF was inbound in 20 minutes, but the landing zone was too hot and they needed to suppress the hilltop positions before the helicopter could land. 20 minutes might be more time than Garrett had, but if they couldn't get a helicopter in because of hostile fire, nobody would be evacuated. Avery confirmed she understood and would mark priority targets, then fired again with the HK-417's heavy round punching through jungle vegetation to find a hostile machine gun position. She identified this as their primary suppression platform and told Parker that taking it out would make the landing zone viable. He confirmed they were working on it and asked her to keep marking targets. Avery divided her attention between Garrett's medical status and the tactical situation, checking his vitals every 30 seconds including pulse, breathing, and level of consciousness. Between checks, she fired on priority targets, coordinated fire team movements, and prevented the defensive line from collapsing. It seemed impossible as she was a medic, not an infantry officer, without training for tactical coordination. She had never engaged multiple enemy positions with a battle rifle while simultaneously treating a critical casualty, yet she was doing it anyway because nobody else could. Garrett quietly told her she was keeping them alive, all of them. When she replied that she was just doing her job, he pointed out that her job was saving lives and right now she was doing it with both a medical kit and a rifle simultaneously, which wasn't standard combat medic procedure. She countered that standard procedure didn't work when the commander was down and the unit was about to be overrun. Garrett managed a weak smile and told her to remind him to recommend her for a medal when they got out of this, to which she replied they should focus on the getting out part first. The firefight continued as Avery marked targets and American weapons responded, systematically reducing the enemy's ability to suppress the landing zone. 15 minutes passed, then 10, and then came the sound everyone had been waiting for: helicopter rotors. Parker called that the QRF was inbound in 2 minutes and they needed the landing zone clear. Concentrating fire on hilltop positions, Avery switched to rapid fire, emptying rounds into the enemy strongpoint that had the best angle on the landing zone. The HK-417's magazine ran dry, and she reloaded with Garrett's spare magazine from his vest and continued firing. American machine guns joined in, saturating the hilltop with suppressive fire, and the enemy fire diminished. The Black Hawk came in fast and low, flared hard, and touched down. Parker ordered Collins to get Garrett on the helicopter. Avery slung the HK-417 across her back, knowing she couldn't leave a weapon for the enemy, and grabbed Garrett's drag handle. Though he was a large man, easily 200 pounds of muscle and gear, she had trained for this and pulled using her legs to get him moving toward the helicopter. Other soldiers assisted, getting Garrett aboard, along with the other 3 critical casualties. Avery climbed in last, her blue medic armband now stained with mud and blood. As the helicopter lifted, hostile fire resumed with rounds pinging off the armored hull, but they were airborne, climbing and clearing the danger zone. Avery knelt beside Garrett, rechecking his vitals as the flight medic moved in to help, but she waved him to the other casualties, saying she had the major and asking him to check the others. Garrett's eyes opened and he acknowledged they had made it. She confirmed they had and assured him he would be fine, as the chest wound was packed, bleeding controlled, and airway secured, with surgery 30 minutes away. When he asked about the unit, she told him Lieutenant Parker had operational control and the QRF was reinforcing the position, adding that they had held the line. Garrett repeated that they held the line with a combat medic coordinating the defense and engaging enemy positions with his rifle, then coughed and winced, commenting that it would make an interesting after-action report. Avery told him to rest and not talk, but he persisted, saying what she did back there wasn't what medics do. She replied that she did what needed to be done to keep him alive and prevent the unit from being overrun, which is exactly what medics do. Despite the pain, Garrett smiled and told her she was one hell of a medic. The helicopter banked toward the field hospital as Avery kept working, checking bandages, monitoring vitals, and preparing Garrett for handoff to the surgical team. In her peripheral vision, she could see the HK-417 slung across her back, the weapon she had used to engage enemy positions while treating casualties and coordinating defensive operations. She had never wanted to be a combat soldier, having joined the army to save lives, to heal, and to make a difference through medicine rather than violence. But today she had saved lives by doing both, and she couldn't decide if that made her a better medic or a completely different kind of soldier altogether. The hospital at Clark Air Base in the Philippines operated with efficiency and quality equipment as Garrett went directly into surgery, with doctors saying he would recover fully since the bullet had missed major organs and Avery's immediate treatment had prevented the collapsed lung from killing him. She sat in the waiting area still in her mud-stained uniform, the blue medic armband a bright spot of color against the camouflage, her hands shaking slightly from residual adrenaline. Lieutenant Parker found her and asked about the major, and she told him Garrett was in surgery and doctors expected a full recovery. Parker sat beside her and said they needed to talk about what happened out there. When she began to explain about taking tactical control, he interrupted to say it was about her saving everyone's ass. Looking tired but animated, Parker told her that in his 6 years as an infantry officer working with dozens of combat medics, he had never seen one do what she did that day. She insisted she was just following Major Garrett's orders, but Parker pointed out that while Garrett gave her initial directions, afterward she was making tactical decisions independently, reading the battlefield, engaging targets, and coordinating fire team movements, all while treating casualties simultaneously, and he asked how she did it. She attributed it to training and necessity, but he countered that her training was medical, not tactical coordination or designated marksmanship with a 7.62mm battle rifle. Avery didn't know how to respond because he was right. She had operated outside her training and designated role, doing things combat medics weren't supposed to do. She explained that with Major Garrett down, someone needed to prevent the tactical situation from collapsing, and since she had the best position to see the battlefield, she did what needed to be done. Parker noted that she did what a squad leader or platoon sergeant would do while treating a sucking chest wound and engaging enemy positions with a rifle she had never fired in combat before. Leaning forward, he told her she needed to understand that this changed things, as the brass would want to talk to her and figure out what happened, possibly changing protocols. He explained they might change protocols for how combat medics operate in small unit actions, since what she did that day, operating as medic, tactical coordinator, and designated marksman simultaneously, wasn't in any manual, but it worked and kept them alive. Before Avery could respond, a colonel she didn't recognize entered the waiting area and introduced himself as Colonel Richard Stone, battalion commander, saying he needed her to come with him because the brigade commander wanted a debrief on the day's operation. When she mentioned waiting for word on Major Garrett, he replied that Garrett was in good hands and the debrief couldn't wait, telling Lieutenant Parker he was coming too. They followed Stone to a conference room where Brigadier General Patricia Vega was reviewing tactical maps and after-action reports. She looked up as they entered and asked Specialist Collins to have a seat. Avery sat, suddenly very aware of how dirty and disheveled she looked compared to the crisp uniforms of the senior officers. General Vega said she had been reviewing reports from the day's operation and multiple witnesses indicated that Collins coordinated the defensive operation after Major Garrett was wounded, asking if that was accurate. Avery replied that she relayed Major Garrett's orders to Lieutenant Parker and that the Major maintained tactical command. When asked for how long, she said until he lost consciousness during the medevac, so Vega confirmed she was operating under direct orders from Major Garrett the entire time. Avery hesitated because that wasn't quite accurate, as after the first few minutes she had been making independent tactical decisions, but admitting that might get her in trouble. Lieutenant Parker spoke up, telling the general that Specialist Collins made several independent tactical decisions after the initial orders from Major Garrett, including identifying a flanking threat, coordinating fire team repositioning, marking priority targets for suppressive fire, and engaging multiple enemy positions with Major Garrett's HK-417, all while treating his critical chest wound. General Vega studied Avery and noted that as a combat medic, she wasn't trained for tactical coordination, asking where she learned those skills. Avery admitted she didn't learn them anywhere and that she just could see what needed to happen, including the terrain, enemy positions, and where their people were vulnerable, so she told Lieutenant Parker what she saw. Vega then asked about engaging enemy combatants with a 7.62mm battle rifle she had never fired before. Avery explained that Major Garrett ordered her to provide suppressive fire and the HK-417 was the available weapon, so she used it. When asked how many enemy combatants she engaged, Avery tried to remember and estimated maybe 10 or 12, explaining she was focused on keeping them from overrunning their position and preventing them from suppressing the landing zone. Vega exchanged a look with Colonel Stone and asked Lieutenant Parker for his assessment of Specialist Collins' actions. Parker stated that she saved Major Garrett's life with immediate medical treatment, prevented their defensive line from collapsing through tactical coordination, and eliminated or suppressed multiple enemy positions that threatened the medevac, adding that without her actions they would have taken significant casualties and possibly lost the entire unit. General Vega then asked Colonel Stone for his assessment, and he stated that what Specialist Collins did was unprecedented, as combat medics don't typically operate as tactical coordinators or designated marksmen, but the unique circumstances including Major Garrett being wounded, enemy pressure threatening to overwhelm the unit, and Collins' position giving her an overview of the battlefield created a situation where her actions were necessary and appropriate. Vega nodded slowly and asked if Collins was aware that combat medics are protected under the Geneva Conventions and that wearing the blue armband signifies medical personnel, not a combatant. Avery confirmed she was aware, and when asked if she knew that engaging in sustained combat operations could be interpreted as a violation of that protected status, she hesitated but said yes, adding that she was defending wounded personnel and enabling their evacuation, which falls under medical duties. Vega smiled slightly and called it a creative interpretation but not inaccurate, then told Collins that what she did that day saved American lives and nobody was going to punish her for it. However, there were questions they needed to answer about combat medic training, their role in small unit operations, and whether they were adequately preparing medics for situations like the one Collins faced. When Avery insisted she just did what Major Garrett ordered her to do, Vega pointed out that she then did considerably more than that, which is why she was being recommended for the Silver Star. Avery's eyes widened in shock and she protested that she didn't deserve it, but Vega explained that Major Garrett submitted the recommendation before going into surgery, Lieutenant Parker endorsed it, Colonel Stone supports it, and she was approving it. Standing up, Vega told Collins she demonstrated exceptional valor under fire by saving her commanding officer's life, coordinating a defensive operation, and engaging enemy forces to protect wounded personnel, which is exactly the kind of action the Silver Star recognizes. Avery insisted she was just doing her job, but Vega countered that her job was saving lives and that day she saved them with both a medical kit and a rifle at the same time, which is remarkable, and told her to own it. As Vega headed for the door, she paused to tell the specialist to get cleaned up and get some rest, as tomorrow she would be briefing the staff on tactical lessons learned, then dismissed them. Avery left the conference room in a daze, trying to process the Silver Star recommendation and briefing the staff, confused because she was a combat medic who treated wounded soldiers, not a tactical coordinator or briefer or whatever the general thought she was. Parker walked with her and asked if she was okay, and she said she didn't understand what was happening. Parker explained that she operated like a tactical genius, and what she did that day demonstrated something the Army had been debating for years about whether combat medics can function as full members of the tactical team rather than just medical support. He told her she proved they can, whether she intended to or not. She insisted she didn't intend anything and just wanted to keep Major Garrett alive, and Parker responded that in doing so, she showed that combat medics in small unit operations need to be more than just healers, that they need to be warriors who choose healing first but who can fight when necessary, adding that's what she was now and she needed to accept it. 3 months later at Fort Sam Houston, Texas, at the Army Medical Department Center and School, Avery stood in front of a classroom full of combat medic students feeling deeply uncomfortable. Major Garrett, fully recovered and back to active duty, had introduced her, and now she was supposed to lecture about tactical decision-making for combat medics despite being just a specialist who had been a combat medic for less than 3 years. She started awkwardly, introducing herself and saying she was there to talk about what happened in the Philippines when Major Garrett was wounded. The students, 20 of them all in training to be combat medics, stared at her with a mix of curiosity and awe. She walked through the situation including the firefight, Garrett going down, the chest wound, and the deteriorating tactical situation, explaining that Major Garrett ordered her to coordinate the defense while treating his wound. She admitted she didn't want to because she was a medic and that wasn't her job, but he was right that someone needed to do it and she had the best position to see the battlefield. One student raised his hand and asked how she knew what orders to give when she wasn't infantry trained. She explained that she wasn't trained but just looked at the terrain, watched how the enemy was moving, and figured out where they were trying to go, then told their people how to stop them, adding that it wasn't fancy tactics, just common sense. Regarding the rifle, Major Garrett's HK-417, she explained he told her to use it to suppress enemy positions that threatened the medevac, pausing to note she had never fired a 7.62mm rifle in combat before, but the fundamentals were the same as any weapon including aim, squeeze, and follow through. When asked how many she engaged, she said she didn't know because she wasn't counting and was focused on keeping the enemy from overrunning their position and threatening wounded soldiers. Major Garrett, standing at the back of the room, spoke up and told her to tell them about the tactical coordination including the fire team repositioning, smoke deployment, and priority target marking. Avery sighed and explained that Major Garrett was wounded but still conscious and could see some of the battlefield but not all of it, so he told her what to look for and she relayed what she saw to Lieutenant Parker, adding that Parker made the tactical decisions and she just provided information. Garrett called this modest but inaccurate, telling the class that Collins made independent tactical decisions that prevented their unit from being overrun and operated as medic, tactical coordinator, and designated marksman simultaneously, which wasn't modest but extraordinary. The students looked at Avery with something approaching reverence, which she hated. She told them to look. She wasn't some tactical genius but a combat medic who got put in an impossible situation and did what she had to do to keep people alive, adding that's the job. She continued that all of them would face situations where standard procedures don't work, and when that happens they adapt and do what needs to be done, whether medical kit, rifle, or radio, whatever keeps their people alive. When asked how they would know what to do, she told them to trust their training, stay calm, assess the situation systematically, and then reflecting back to that hillside in the Philippines, she added they needed to accept that sometimes saving lives means fighting. She admitted she didn't want to pick up that rifle because she was a healer, but at that moment, healing meant preventing enemy fighters from killing wounded Americans, so she fought. The lecture continued as Avery walked them through the tactical decisions, medical procedures, and coordination. Challenges, trying to demystify it and show them that what she did was just applied common sense under extreme pressure. However, she could see they didn't believe her. As to them, she was the medic who grabbed her commander's gun and became a legend, the specialist who coordinated a defensive operation while treating a sucking chest wound, the healer who could fight when necessary. After class, Garrett found her and told her she did well, but she questioned why he wanted her to do this, saying these students need to learn from real instructors, not someone who got lucky once. Garrett raised an eyebrow and told her what she did wasn't luck but skill, courage, and adaptability, which the students needed to see, as they needed to know that combat medics can operate at that level. She insisted she was just a medic, but he countered that she was the medic who saved his life and prevented a unit from being overrun, the medic who demonstrated that medical personnel can function as full tactical team members when necessary, and the medic who proved that healers can fight. Smiling, he told her she was a legend whether she liked it or not, to which she replied she didn't like it, and he acknowledged he knew but it was true anyway. He gestured to a folder on the desk and told her that her Silver Star citation was approved and the ceremony was next month. She was also being promoted to sergeant, and there was talk of creating a new combat medic specialization based on her actions, something like advanced tactical medic for medics who are cross-trained in infantry tactics and enhanced weapons qualification. She protested that this wasn't necessary, but he insisted it wasn't, that she proved it was necessary, adding that she changed how the army thinks about combat medics and she needed to accept it, own it, and use it to make their medical personnel better prepared for the impossible situations they would face. Avery looked at the Silver Star citation, the promotion orders, and the proposal for advanced tactical medic training, thinking that she just wanted to save lives, to be a good medic, and to help people. But she had ended up changing doctrine, becoming a legend, and proving that combat medics were more than just healers but were warriors who chose healing first but who could fight when their people's lives depended on it. She told Garrett she was still just a medic, but he disagreed, saying she was the medic who saved her commander in a firefight, then grabbed his gun and became a legend, and that's who she was now, telling her to accept it. Maybe he was right, she thought. Maybe that day in the Philippine jungle had revealed something about herself she hadn't known existed, or perhaps she was still the same person, someone willing to do whatever it took to keep her people alive, whether medical kit or rifle, healing or fighting, whatever the mission required. The medic who saved her commander then grabbed his gun and proved that healers could be warriors when necessary, became a legend. 6 weeks later, the Silver Star ceremony at Fort Bragg drew more attention than Avery expected as the brigade commander pinned the medal on her dress uniform while Major Garrett stood at attention in the front row, fully recovered and grinning with pride. The citation was read aloud, describing gallantry in action against an armed enemy and exceptional courage by providing life-saving medical treatment to her critically wounded commander while simultaneously coordinating defensive operations and engaging hostile forces with precision fire, with her actions under extreme duress preventing the loss of American lives and ensuring mission success. It still felt surreal because she had just done what needed to be done, hadn't she? After the ceremony, a young private approached her hesitantly and addressed her as sergeant, saying he was shipping out to medic training next month and wanted to ask if she was scared when she had to fight instead of heal. Avery considered the question carefully and told him every time, explaining that fighting isn't what she trains for and isn't who she is, but sometimes it's what's necessary to protect the people she's trying to save. When he asked how she deals with it, she said she remembers why she's there, that her job is keeping people alive, so if that means treating wounds she treats wounds, if it means coordinating fire she coordinates fire, and if it means picking up a rifle, she touched the Silver Star on her chest, then she picks up the rifle, adding whatever keeps her people breathing. The private nodded slowly and said that's what they mean when they say she became a legend, to which she replied she became a medic who refused to let her people die and that's all. But even as she said it, Avery knew it wasn't quite true because she had become something more that day in the jungle, proof that combat medics could operate at the highest level when circumstances demanded it. Major Garrett found her after the ceremony ended and asked how it felt, and she said it felt strange and she was still processing everything. He told her she changed doctrine and the Army was implementing that advanced tactical medic program based on her actions, meaning future combat medics would train for exactly what she did, operating as both healer and tactical operator when necessary. She said she just hoped they would be better prepared than she was, and he assured her they would be because she showed them what's possible, adding that for what it's worth, he was glad she was there that day because he would be dead without her. She replied that he would have done the same for any of them, and he acknowledged maybe but pointed out she did it while grabbing his HK-417 and holding off an enemy force, which is what makes her special. Avery looked at the Silver Star and then at the blue combat medic armband still sewn onto her dress uniform, thinking about being both healer and warrior at once, with neither role diminished by the other. She had saved her commander's life with a medical kit, then picked up his gun and saved everyone else, and somehow that combination had made her something the Army had never quite seen before, a legend, the medic who proved healers could fight when their people needed it most.